I didn't use fall. I didn't use slide. I don't think that's what this is. All right, welcome in. It's the Breer Report for April the 25th. The first round of the NFL draft is now in the books. It was a long night, a lot of drama, a lot to get into, and we are going to get into it right here, right now. And our first topic is the most obvious one. Colorado quarterback Shedeur Sanders is still available here on Friday morning. We'll see what happens on Friday night with the second and third round scheduled for Green Bay. But for right now, Shedeur Sanders is still on the board. And you'll notice there's one word that I did not use there. I didn't use fall. I didn't use slide. I don't think that's what this is. And I think part of the problem here is the way we've discussed Shedeur Sanders over the last 2 or 3 months, in that he's been discussed as if he's going to be a top 5, top 10 pick. And I just don't think there were very many people inside the NFL, and I'm talking about scouts and coaches, who saw him that way. And I've said over the last few weeks that I think the guy needed to find a fit. Here's why. I said the same thing about Bo Nix last year. He doesn't have elite arm talent. He doesn't have elite athleticism. And there were a lot of adjustments he needed to make to his game. So he was going to need to find a place that was going to be a fit for him the same way that Bo Nix found Denver. And I don't know that Bo Nix would have gone in the first round. Maybe the Saints would have taken him a couple picks later, but I don't know that Bo Nix would have gone in the first round if the Broncos don't pick him 12th overall. But you know what? That was a perfect fit. He went to the right place. The Broncos looked at it and said, we don't have a second-round pick. They'd given out their second-round pick the year before for Sean Payton. We're not going to get a shot at him in the third round. We can get cute and try to trade down here, or we can just take the guy we like. And they took the guy they liked, and no one remembers the rest of it because Bo Nix went to the perfect place, and he wound up being a Rookie of the Year contender and the quarterback of a playoff team in 2024. I think that was the only path to Shedeur Sanders being a first-round pick, again, because he does not have the physical traits of a first-round quarterback. Doesn't mean he can't succeed, and it didn't mean that there was no chance he was going to go in the first round. But I do think the fact that he was seen as a top 5, top 10 type of pick publicly, which again was unfounded based on what NFL teams saw, actually wound up hurting him because he was handled through this process as if like he was a guy who had a ton of options and he was narrowing them. And that just was never the case. And so when you go into some of these meetings and you do turn off some teams, and some teams do get the feeling that he does not want to go there, and you have Deion coming out publicly saying there are some teams that he does not want to go to. Well, word's going to get around on the way that you're handling these things. Word's going to get around, and teams are going to look at this and say, how does he fit in for us? If he is the 20th pick, the 25th pick, the 30th pick, and we're going to put him behind an established starter for a year, how does he fit into that? If you're a top 5, top 10 pick, you can handle things that way. Abdul Carter only took 4 visits. Abdul Carter turned down the Jaguars and the Raiders who wanted to visit with him because he felt strongly he was going to go within the first 4 picks. He's that type of prospect. He went 3rd overall to the Giants. Shedeur was not on that tier of prospect. Again, NFL teams never saw him that way. And if you listened to people who are talking to the people inside the NFL over the last few months, this is what you heard. This is exactly what you heard. And again, like, I don't know. And I love Deion. Like, I worked with Deion at NFL Network. I love Deion as a person, as a player. He made such a difference in the NFL in so many different ways. I just don't know that they handled this whole situation the right way. Again, handling him as if he's going to be a top 5 pick, and conducting himself as he's going to be a top 5 pick, and not like the rest of the prospects conduct themselves, which is, I got to impress everybody. I got to be on at all times. I got to show everybody who I am and put my best foot forward with absolutely everybody. So I give myself the best chance to get in the best place to go and become a great NFL player. That's the way I think he should have handled it. And unfortunately for Deion and Shedeur, now you're looking at a situation where it's kind of unpredictable what's going to happen on Friday night. No one's rooting for this sort of outcome for anybody. But I do think this is a reflection not on any of the narratives that you heard during the week. This is a reflection of the way the NFL looked at him, which is this is probably physically a day 2 type of quarterback. And yes, he had great success at Colorado, but there have been tons of college quarterbacks who've had great success who just haven't projected to the pros the way they projected to the college game. I think a great example of it, the all-time leading passer in NCAA history is Case Keenum. And Case Keenum had a really good NFL career. He started for a few years, got a team to an NFC championship game, but physically just wasn't quite there. And I think too many people look at it and just say, well, because of what he did at Colorado, it's not fair that he didn't go in the first round. That's not the case. That's not what this is. This is a football evaluation. This is how teams saw him. And again, I think for him, what he was going to need to do was go out and find the right fit and find a team that looked at him and said, that's the right fit for us. And if he had been more open-minded through the process to it, if I think he had gone and said, I'm going to put my best foot forward with all 32, maybe we would have a different result now. So, you hope for the best for him. He seems like a good kid. I don't know him at all, but seems like a good kid and a good-hearted kid. We'll see what happens. But for right now, again, Friday morning here, this is a result that I don't think very many people inside the NFL would have been surprised by if we had told you this was the way it was going to be a couple of days ago. I'm certainly not surprised that this is the outcome, but I know a lot of people on the outside are. Our second topic for today, the Jaguars make a monster move up. They give up their first round pick, which 5th overall, their second round pick, 36th overall, and their first round pick next year to move up 3 spots and get Travis Hunter. And for the Jaguars, this again reflects the background of the guys they just hired. Liam Cohen, their new head coach, James Gladstone, their new general manager, both those guys coming over with Rams background. Liam isn't coming directly from the Rams, James is. But you see that sort of go for broke mentality with this move. My question is, are they close enough to do this? And you know what? That's a Jaguars team that I think was afflicted over the last few years by paying some good players great money. And so do they have the foundation pieces in place with Travis Hunter coming in now where you could look at Hunter and say, yes, that's a finishing piece. They really don't need too many more pieces around what they already have when you add Hunter to the mix, where they're going to need all of this draft capital over the next 2 years. Make no mistake about it, the 36th pick in this year's draft, that's a valuable piece of real estate. In next year's pick, we'll see what it is. It's sort of a bet on yourself if you're Liam Cohen and James Gladstone and Tony Baselli and the new brass in Jacksonville. That's going to look bad if that's the 5th or 6th or 7th or 8th pick in the draft. The Jaguars are in the playoffs, and that's the 23rd or 24th or 25th pick. Well, then, you're looking at this a lot differently. So, big swing by the Jaguars. It's sort of a reflection to me on where they think they are, that they don't think they're that far off. Because if you think you're way off and you think you need a bunch of pieces to get to the point where you're ready to challenge the Houston Texans, who've won the division the last 2 years, you're ready to advance a round or two in the playoffs, then this move would 100% make sense. We'll see if they're there or not. And if they're right about that, if they're right that they are actually close, then that pick, of course, naturally becomes the value. The pick next year, obviously, this year's pick is set in stone. For the Browns, I think to some degree, this is a chance for them to reset things a little bit. They lost all that draft capital in the Deshaun Watson trade. And, I think looking forward now, you look at it, Myles Garrett is getting a little bit older. They've got some pieces on that offensive line that are getting a little bit older. Obviously, Nick Chubb, a guy who's been a legend for them, not there anymore. So, you look at all of the moving parts in that roster, and it's really gotten to a point now where they're starting to feel the effects of having lost all that draft capital for Deshaun Watson, where the roster is getting older in some spots. And so having the chance to reset where you have 3 of the first 36 picks this year with Mason Graham there now, and then 3 picks in the first 2 rounds next year, you really give yourself a shot to replenish things. And obviously, to some degree, they're going to be judged here, fair or not, on what does Travis Hunter look like in Jacksonville and what does Mason Graham look like in Cleveland. And I think Graham's a fantastic player. The question with him isn't whether or not he can be a good player. It's going to be whether or not he can be a great player. We know he can be a good player. He's a really great player at Michigan. I think he projects the pros as a guy who coming out like is it a baseline a pretty good player. The question is, can he elevate to the point where you would think he'd be worth the 5th overall pick? And that part of it to me remains to be seen. There are a lot of people who looked at it and said Walter Nolan, the Ole Miss defensive tackle, actually had the higher ceiling of the two guys there, and even maybe his teammate at Michigan, Kenneth Grant, might have had a little bit of a higher ceiling. So it'll be interesting to track those things as all of those guys move into the NFL. Our third topic for today, Jaxson Dart is now a New York Giant. Again, this is one of those things that over the last few weeks started to crystallize. The Giants have done a ton of work on quarterbacks over the course of the last couple of years. And as everybody was zeroed in on the work that they did on Shedeur Sanders this year, what people failed to realize was the Giants had done that work on a lot of quarterbacks. They had high-level executives get multiple exposures in the fall to at least 8 different quarterbacks, 5 guys in this year's draft. And Dart was one of them, of course. And then 3 guys who aren't even in the class right now. 3 guys who are draft eligible, but presumably will be in next year's draft class. In Penn State's Drew Aller, LSU's Garrett Nussmeier, and Miami's now Carson Beck was at Georgia last year. And so this is the culmination of a couple of years of work on all the quarterbacks. They weren't just looking at Shedeur Sanders, contrary to popular belief. And this is, I think, a bet that Brian Daboll is going to be able to get the most out of a player who is a good fit for what he wants to do offensively. You get Abdul Carter at 3, and then you come back into the first round and you get Jaxson Dart at the bottom of the first round and assure yourself of that. I'm not sure Cleveland would have taken him at the top of the second round. I think the Saints could have been lurking there as a potential team to come up and try to steal Jaxson Dart from the Giants. But there are some relationships that are important here. Brian Daboll got the chance to spend a lot of one-on-one time, be it over the phone, in person, over Zooms, with Jaxson Dart over the last couple of months. And they were able to build a strong relationship. And there are ties that bind here. Brian Daboll, one of his mentors in football was Charlie Weis, Jaxson Dart's offensive coordinator at Ole Miss, Charlie Weis Jr. And I can just tell you from having talked to Charlie Sr. over the last couple of months, he's a friend of mine, about this. He was over the moon high on Jaxson Dart. Another guy who was really high on Jaxson Dart within that Ole Miss program was Joe Judge. Not only is Joe Judge the ex-coach of the Giants, he and Daboll were also staff mates in New England from 2013 to 2016. So with this player, the Giants see a guy who they have certainty on. They know who he is. They're, I think, very well schooled on his ability to come into New York and handle everything. And I'm fascinated to see how this works. From a playing standpoint, one of the big questions NFL teams had was the offense he's coming from. Lane Kiffin has run an offense of the Baylor spread since he got to Ole Miss a few years back. My understanding of it is that over the last year, maybe a little over a year, they've started to incorporate back some of the West Coast concepts that Lane Kiffin ran earlier in his career because Jaxson Dart could handle it. There were also things that the coaches who evaluated him started to see, things like moving safeties with his eyes that really translate to the NFL level. And one interesting thing that I had heard about Jaxson when people were assessing him, and this was early in the process, but it was a simple way to put it. I was talking to a coach, this wasn't a coach of the Giants, who had looked at both guys in January and had gotten a good look at both guys and assessed them. And like he said, I'll make it easy for you. If you want to talk about what they're going to be as pros and how they translate to the pro game, it's like, all you got to know, when those guys are in trouble, when Jaxson Dart and Shedeur Sanders are in trouble, Jaxson Dart moves forward, Shedeur Sanders moves backward. What does that mean? Well, it means when the pocket closes down and the rush comes, Jaxson Dart starts climbing the pocket, eyes downfield. Shedeur also keeps his eyes downfield, but he had a tendency to bail out of the back of the pocket and get away with his feet. Would he be able to do that in the NFL? He doesn't have elite athleticism. Can he get away from the rush that way? I don't see. I don't think many NFL teams saw that translating to the NFL game where he'd need to be rewired. Where with Jaxson Dart, you already had that built in. So I think Jaxson Dart really good fit for the Giants. I like the pick at the bottom of the round, and I think a lot of the fit there has to do with Dart and his ties to the Giants organization through some of the guys that coached him at Ole Miss. Appreciate you guys coming out. We'll have more here next week on the whole big picture, overarching themes of the draft. I appreciate you guys sticking with us through all of our draft coverage this week. Try to give you the very best draft coverage there is out there, and we will keep it going on Friday night into Saturday. Can't wait to keep engaging with all of you guys. Again, look for another Breer Report coming early next week.